Haley. I apologize there. We had a little, isn't it something how much we depend on technology in that, but the goodness of Jesus. 2 Samuel chapter 6, please. 2 Samuel chapter 6. You know, well, let me mention a few things here. There's a lot of things going through my head this morning in that, it just as an introduction to this message, we as followers of Jesus Christ, there are some expectations of us because we're supposed to act like followers of Jesus Christ. But we often fail in that. And interesting, Mac isn't here today. She went down to West Virginia where she was originally before she came here, and to see a couple of her friends graduate. And so she called us yesterday, and she was talking to me about an app on the phone. And I said, well, Mac, it's a real popular thing right now, but I said, I've heard some bad things about that. And she goes, I've heard some bad things about church. I said, yeah, you're right. I said, now, but the thing is, of course, Dad's got to have something to come back with. And I said, yeah, but that app was started for bad. The church is supposed to was started for good. But you know what? Isn't it true that sometimes the meanest, nastiest people claim to be followers of Jesus Christ? We do. And you say, well, come on, you're just trying to nitpick. You're just trying to get involved in my life. Well, no. Here's the thing. If you are a Philadelphia Eagles fan, I'm so sorry. But if you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, and you go to the game, you probably are going to wear Steelers paraphernalia because you want to be, you got your terrible towel or whatever. There are certain expectations if you are a Steelers fan. And we understand that. I mean, I used to harass my father-in-law because when I first started dating Beth Ann, you would walk into their house and there was a certain area of his house that was Penn State everything. I used to tease him and say that I needed to come in and light candles to the shrine of Joe Paterno. I mean, it was just Okay. Hey, wow. Yeah, and there we are. Yeah, Jerry said that battery wasn't the Energizer Bunny. All right, so now we can hear. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Levi. Okay, so where were we? I remember as a kid, that Michael, her statement wasn't always necessarily presented as a bitter statement. People would get up there and say, see, bless God, David was dancing. And Michael set him straight kind of thing. But I remember as a teenager going, well, David danced before the Lord. And, teenagers said that to me. Well, David danced. Okay, yeah, David danced before the Lord. But I'm sorry, some of the dances that are going on today, I'm not, I'm old. I'm not going to try to demonstrate, but yes. And even that floss thing, I don't even know how they do that. But anyhow, some of the things are very sexual in nature, and so I'm sorry, David was dancing before the Lord, but it was not sexual in nature. But here's the thing: also, you bumps on a pickle that think, well, bless God, if I'm going to be spiritual, I will, I'm going to have a certain tone in my voice, and we won't get too excited in church, no, come on, that's a bunch of garbage. David, the man after God's own heart, was jumping and leaping and dancing and praising the Lord, and God didn't strike David dead because he was should I say having fun? Maybe that brings it down too much, but was rejoicing and wound tighter an 8-day alarm clock because God's presence was coming to Jerusalem. God wasn't going, David, you wicked one. No. Actually, it says, well, I don't jump. I'm not going to jump ahead of myself, but let's look at Michal, a woman of bitterness. But before we too quickly jump to judgment on her, let's step back and look. And this is something that we need to do that can be difficult for us. If there is an area where we don't struggle, it's easier for us to look at someone who struggles in the same area and just go, I can't believe you struggle with that. Because we don't struggle with it. But then an area where we struggle, if somebody treats us the same way, well, don't judge me. Well, before we do the judging thing or whatever we want to call it, let's remember that there are usually reasons that people act a certain way. And we all know that person that is bitter, just incredibly bitter. And they can't, it's interesting too, many years ago, in being around people, bitterness has an incredible memory. Just remember that. Bitterness has an incredible memory. When you're bitter about something, you can remember minute details years later. 20, 30 years later, you can still remember those things. Why? Because bitterness has an incredible memory. But step back before we start casting whatever at that bitter person, and let's just step back and let's look. So let's look here at Michal. First of all, we're going to need to turn back to 1 Samuel chapter 18. 1 Samuel chapter 18, and I want us to see her picture. 1 Samuel chapter 18. And that is, look at verse 17. 1 Samuel 18, verse 17. And Saul said to David, behold, my elder daughter Merab, her will I give thee to wife. Only be thou valiant for me, and fight the Lord's battles. For Saul said, let not mine hand be upon him, but let the hand of the Philistines be upon him. And David said unto Saul, who am I, and what is my life or my father's family in Israel, that I should be son-in-law to the king? But it came to pass at the time when Merab, Saul's daughter, should have been given to David, that she was given unto Adriel the to wife. But look at verse 20. And Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David. Now, first of all, her picture of long-suffering. Her picture of long-suffering. Right there, initially, her older sister was supposed to be given to David to wife, to be given as David's wife. And it ended up that something else happened. She was given to somebody else. But she had the patience to wait. She loved David. Now, this is not the bitter woman that made that statement to David. Oh, how glorious was the king today. That basically what she was saying was that made himself nude in front of all the maids of Israel, all the lower people of Israel. Oh, that this was far from that. This is a picture, a woman of long suffering. She loved David. But then that's the second thing, her picture of love. Look at verse 20. And Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David, and they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. Then jump down to verse 28. And Saul saw and knew that the Lord was with David, and that Michal, Saul's daughter, loved him. So she was a patient woman. She was a woman of long suffering, her picture of long suffering. She loved David. And then the third thing, her picture of loyalty. Her picture of loyalty. So here is this younger sister that just sees David and loves him, man. It's just wow. And so she's patient and just keeps loving him and loves him. And so much so that people go, man, Saul, your daughter Michal loves David. And Saul's going, cool. But Saul had bad intentions in that. But so turn over to chapter 19. Chapter 19, verse 11. Saul also sent messengers unto David's house to watch him and to slay him in the morning. And Michal, David's wife, told him, saying, if thou save not thy life tonight, tomorrow thou shalt be slain. So Michal let David down through a window, and he went and fled and escaped. And Michal took an image and laid it in the bed, and put a pillow of goat's hair for his bolster, and covered it with cloth. And when Saul sent messengers to take David, she said, he is sick. And Saul sent messengers again to David, saying, bring him up to me in the bed, that I may slay him. And when the messengers were come in, behold, there was an image in the bed with a pillow of goat's hair for his bolster. And Saul said unto Michal, why hast thou deceived me so, and sent away mine enemy? And he is escaped. And Michal answered Saul, he said unto me, let me go, why should I kill thee? So, I mean, now she did lie too there, but let's see this. Because of her long suffering, because of her love, she was loyal to David. And this is a time when, and we'll talk more about this in a minute, but Saul had he threw a spear at David 2 different times. Then, he kept trying to find ways to kill David. And so Michal says to him, David, dude, I need you alive. And if you are going to stay alive, you've got to escape tonight. If you wait till tomorrow morning, you are a dead man. And so she lets him down out of the window, and he is able to escape. She even makes a little image in the bed, so they think he's still in bed. And so she was very, very loyal. So here is this woman that starts off a very loving, loyal, long-suffering person. So she's nice. She's a great woman. So that's her picture. But here's where things change. I want to see Roman numeral 2, or Roman numeral 2 in my notes. Her pain. Her pain. And many times, I'm not going to say always, but many times, when someone becomes bitter, the bitterness has a source. The bitterness has a well that springs up, and it's usually from a source of pain. Something horrible has happened in that person's life. Now, you say, Pastor Dave, are you making an excuse for bitterness? No, I'm not. We'll talk about that more later too. But let's take a time and look at her pain. So here's Michal, and her pain, first of all, from others' actions. From others' actions. Now, this is back in 1 Samuel chapter 18, where verse 20, and Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David, and they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. And Saul said, I will give him her, that she may be a snare to him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him. Wherefore Saul said to David, Thou shalt this day be my son-in-law in the one of the twain. All right, so first of all, from others, Michal's pain from others' actions. Her dad was a crazy man. And I'm not trying to be unkind. He really was. He tried to kill her, the man she loved, twice, and he tried to kill her brother. Now, something else that was pointed out to me many years ago in a book that I was told to read in college, there are only two people in the life of David that came after David that did not die. David was a fierce, mighty warrior. Anybody who came against him, they lost. They died. The two people was Saul and Absalom. Absalom, his son. Saul, and the two times Saul threw a spear at him, David, it says he dodged the spear, avoided out of his presence twice. But here, Saul is a crazy man. And jealousy was one of the things that drove him to this. He was jealous of David. And it started after David killed Goliath, and they came back into town, and they're having this parade, and the ladies are saying, Saul has slain his thousands, but David his 10,000s. And Saul, it says, from that day, Saul eyed David and said, they have ascribed to him 10,000, and to me but 1,000. What can he have more than the kingdom? So Saul got jealous of David. And he also disobeyed the Lord, and the Lord took his spirit off of him, put the spirit on David, and Saul was given an evil spirit from the Lord. And so he really became a crazy man. So her pain from others' actions. Her dad was a crazy man that tried to kill the man she loved and her brother. And so why was he crazy? Because he chose to disobey the Lord. Now, her dad also used her as a way to get David killed. Now, this is not the way a dad is supposed to act. But first of all, she knows that her dad is nuts. And then her dad tries to kill her husband. He tries to kill her brother. Then he uses her as a pawn to... he didn't care if Michal loves David. He just cared that David would then get killed by the Philistines because he loved Michal. And Saul said that he needed to David go attack some Philistines, and that way he would get killed, and then he'd be done with David. And so poor Michal is being used as a pawn. Then look over at 1 Samuel chapter 25. 1 Samuel chapter 25. Look at verse 44. But Saul had given Michal, his daughter, David's wife, to Phalti, the son of Laish, which was of Galem. So, not only does Saul give Michal to David to be his wife so that David will get killed by the Philistines, but then David has to run for his life, which Michal told him to go. And so Saul probably... to be spiteful to David, takes his wife and gives her to be somebody else's wife. Again, somebody else's actions. So the guy that is supposed to have her best interest at heart and protect her against all threats is just using her to advance his own purposes. And usually, I just put this. For much of her life, she has been not much more than a pawn for her dad. And you know, a lot of times when someone they have become bitter because of deep pain. The deep pain is someone else being selfish, and whatever it is, they use that individual for their own purposes. And that's what happened to Michal. And she became a bitter woman. So her pain from others' actions. Then let's turn to 2 Samuel chapter 3, please. 2 Samuel chapter 3. Now, let me just say, this thought hit my head. I really hope, whether it's in this room, out through YouTube, out through the radio, my intent is not to trigger anyone this morning. Not at all. And I know there are certain things, and I know that's kind of the up-to-date terminology, triggers. We used to talk about getting on my last nerve, whatever. But there people do get triggered in things. I've talked to guys who've been in battle, and they go and there's a fireworks show or something, and they have panic attack or, PTSD. They want to run and hide somewhere. Or one guy told me he had been over in Afghanistan, and he went to a wedding, I think, at a church. And it wasn't one of the, like a Baptist church or anything. But it was one where there was chanting, kind of a chanting thing. And he said, I had to get out of there because of the way it was being said in the church. It made him think about hearing those prayers chanted over there. And he had a PTSD kind of panic attack, had to run out. So those what would be called triggers. So my goal today is not to trigger anyone. My goal today is to obey the Lord, number one. But number two, to help us remember that when people are mean and nasty and hateful or whatever, there's usually a reason. Michal, and so I'm trying to present this case of what happened to Michal. So we talked about her pain from others' actions. Then the next thing, her pain from others' agreements. Her pain from others' agreements. 2 Samuel chapter 3, look at verse 12. And Abner sent messengers to David on his behalf, saying, Whose is the land? Saying also, Make thy league with me, and behold, my hand shall be with thee to bring about all Israel unto thee. Just to give explanation, David had ruled in Judah, just Judah, for 7 years, and not all Israel. All right? And he said, Well, I will make a league with thee, but one thing I require of thee, that is, thou shalt not see my face, except thou first bring Michal, Saul's daughter, when thou comest to see my face. And David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, Saul's son, saying, Deliver me my wife Michal, which I espoused to me for 100 foreskins of the Philistines. So, now, Michal's dad dies. The death of her father and her brother in battle. Now, so she's the daughter of a king. She's been used as a pawn by this king. His actions have caused her pain. Now, Israel is turning from her family to David. So her dad and her brother have been killed in battle, and her family is losing power. And so all of these things are happening. And so Abner, the captain of the host of Israel, is making a deal with David. And David says, here's the deal. You will not see my face unless you get Michal and bring her back to me. Now, so I forget how many years David ran from Saul, but then David became king of Judah for 7 years. So for years now, Michal has been the wife of another man. And David says, I'm not making this deal with you, because what was happening in different battles between Judah and Israel, David's forces just mopped up the floor with the people of Israel. I mean, Israel's army could, even though it was one tribe against 11, they just couldn't stand against David's warriors. And so Abner, the captain of the host of Israel, said, hey, it's time for us to all become one again. And so David says, I will not make this deal with you unless you bring me my wife. So here she goes again. Not her choice. But somebody else makes an agreement that's going to change her life. Again. So, her pain from others' actions, from others' agreements. But then this last one. Chapter 3, from others' abandonment. From others' abandonment. Look at verse 15. And Ishbosheth sent and took her from her husband, even from Phaltiel, the son of, I don't know how to pronounce that dude's name, but Phaltiel, the son of Laish. And her husband went with her along, weeping behind her to Bahurim. Then said Abner unto him, Go, return. And he returned. Now, if you think about it, now I know there are people like, I can handle myself. I still, most of the time, will open the door for Beth Ann to get in the car, to get out of the car, and that. But, sometimes girls will go, I don't need him to open the door for me. I am capable to open my own door. Nobody's saying you're not capable, okay? Nobody's saying that. I know you have the ability to reach up. Oh, no. Okay, but it is a point of honor. And so, so most of the time, especially the young ladies, but even boys, when dads, boys, they kind of sometimes resist, but there's that mentality that dad is going to protect me. And then in the home, like after you get married, my husband's going to protect me. So here, she is now, for the second time, taken from her husband. And as she's being taken away, her husband is walking along crying and probably begging for her not to be taken away. All right, so good for now. But then Abner, again, now him being captain of the host means that he was a warrior. Means that he had been in battle, probably taken people's lives in battle. Abner, finally, he says to her husband, hit the road. You have to study deeply to find that in the scripture. But he says, go, return. And get out the back, Jack, find a new key, and set yourself free. I don't know, some of you old people remember that old song. And my wife's going, honey, you sang. You don't know it? Oh, of course you don't. Little goody here. Do you old people remember that one? Yeah, see? Okay, but anyhow, I don't know when people went, he sang. I'm sorry, okay, it was just one of those weird thoughts that hit my head, so sorry. Abner turns and says, go, return. And I don't know, the Bible doesn't tell us, but very possibly Abner may have reached for his sword. He may have gone, dude, go home. And so he goes, okay, gone. Now, old Thaltiel, or whatever you pronounce his name, probably all wives would have wanted him to stay there and fought for her. And you know what? If he would have killed him, it probably wouldn't have been the first person he ever killed. He was one to be feared. He was a mighty military man. But what wife wouldn't want her husband to at least try to fight for her? But Michal, her husband abandons her. So she has been in pain over and over and over and over and over again. She's been used as a pawn. She's just been used, and she loves a man, and then to protect him, he has him escape, and then she's taken from him and given to another man, and then she probably finally learns to start to love him again, and now she's taken from him again, and over, and her dad doesn't protect her. Her dad uses her. And it's just pain after pain after pain after pain, which no one is denying the pain. I remember that when this finally hit me, because I would look at Michal, that bitter old woman, and then I'm going, whoa, she had some rough stuff. I don't think anybody humanly would blame her because of her pain. But know this, and Rome numeral 3 in my notes is the first point was her picture, then secondly her pain. But there's a crucial spot here, kind of a Y in the road. And I guess I'm not even saying what it is yet. Well, I'll give you the third point in just a second. There's a Y in the road. No one is denying the pain. And whether it's someone in here, someone out there YouTube, out through the radio, some of you maybe have gone through pain that I can't even imagine. I am sure. Pain, emotional, physical, spiritual, whatever pain that I can't even imagine. But when that happens, you come to a Y in the road. And it's what happens with the pain, how you handle the pain. Bitterness is like a poison And in fact, that's the third point, her poison. Bitterness is something that will eat us alive from the inside. It just, I mean, medically, even medically, they talk about how bitterness, it'll kill you from the inside. I heard somebody say, bitterness and unforgiveness is like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. That really is what it is. So Michal, when she came to that Y in the road, she went through pain. At first, she was a loyal, loving, long-suffering person. She was a great, great girl. But when after the pain, over and over, and she got hit and knocked down and kicked while she was down, all these things. I'm not saying that she went through it, had an easy life, but when it came to that, how she dealt with it, instead of dealing with it and letting God heal her from it, she let it become a poison in her life. And she despised David. She despised him. And David is the one, he had her taken away from her husband. Why couldn't he have just left her there? I don't know. But we can't answer those questions, but the point is this. When you have that pain, when you have that, somebody has the people's choices, others' actions, others' agreements, others' abandonment, all the things that you have been through, how do you deal with that? There's a Y in the road, and what you choose at that Y will impact generations of people. Generations. And you say, well, Pastor Dave, you have no idea the pain. I agree. But it still comes down to the fact that a lack of forgiveness, bitterness is something that opens doors in our lives that will, again, impact generations of people. Remember in Matthew chapter 18, when Jesus is telling the story of the servant, and I'm taking too much time, but when he's telling the story of the servant that owes his master an impossible debt. It was more than the taxes of 3 cities. It was an impossible debt for him to pay, and the master forgives him. He wipes the debt away, and then that same servant goes out and grabs another servant by the throat and says, pay me that thou owest. And it was really low. And when the guy said, please, he says almost the exact same thing. Please, give me time. I'll pay everything I owe you. And he wouldn't, and he throws him into prison. And people go back to the master and tells him what's happened. And then he brings that servant back in. He says, oh, thou wicked servant. I forgave you such a huge debt. How could you not forgive your fellow servant? And he says, here's what I'm going to do. I'm putting you in jail, and I'm turning you over to the tormentors till you can pay me all that you owe me. And you know what? When you're in the tormentors, imagine the pit. You're there in the torture chamber. You're not making a whole lot of money. You're not going, how much an hour am I getting here as I'm getting tortured? No, and so for the rest of his life, he was going to be tortured because he did not show. And then Jesus says this, I think it's in verse 35 of that chapter. I can't remember. And he says, so likewise shall my heavenly Father do to you, if you from your heart forgive not others their trespasses. Jesus wasn't denying people doing you wrong. He was talking about, do we forgive them? And he says, if you will not forgive people their wrong, God will turn you over to tormentors. I'm not making it up. Read Matthew 18. And what are those tormentors? Circumstances. But you know what? Not everybody likes this when I say this, but I believe it can also turn you over to demonic tormentors. Again, you may not agree with it, but here's the deal. The Bible says there is a war that goes on around us. If there was no war, why did he say, take unto you the armor of God? If the only thing we had to worry about was our own flesh, why did he say, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against rulers of darkness, against spiritual wickedness in high places? Why did he say, take unto you the armor of God? That you may be able, that the shield of faith, you may be able to quench the fiery darts of the wicked one. So if there is not a battle that goes on, If God wouldn't turn you over to demonic tormentors for your lack of forgiveness, why in the world would he say, for you wrestle not against flesh and blood? The reason is because there are demonic tormentors. Yes, it's only a third of it. We are tempted by the world, the flesh, and the devil. And everything is not the devil's fault. But on the other side of it, it's not that nothing is the devil's fault either. Why did I can't remember the first part of the verse. That's terrible. But your adversary, as a roaring lion, walketh about seeking whom he may devour. Submit yourself, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. So there is a battle. There is a real devil. And Jesus said, if you will not forgive from your heart the trespasses that people do against you, my Father will turn you over to tormentors. There's a why in the road. You may have gone through unbelievable pain that nobody can even imagine how terrible the pain was that you went through. And I am so sorry for that. I wish I could do something. But it comes down to this. What will you do with that pain? Are you going to stay bitter the rest of your life and try to have vengeance? Remember, God says, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. Or are you going to give it to God and you say, Pastor Dave, that's easier said than done. Yes, I know. That's why so much is mentioned in the Word of God. I am not up here saying it's easy to forgive. It would be way easier to do like, well, I can't remember if it's Elijah or Elisha, call down fire from heaven and consume them. Sometimes we'd be like, yeah, there's that deadbeat. Lord, fire from heaven, yeah. We'd be taking pictures, man. Wait, Lord, before you send that fire, let me put the video on. Instagram, selfie. 3, 2, 1, yeah. But that's not how God deals with it. Even though we would like it, God says, vengeance is mine. I will repay. Keep your hands off of it. It's mine. Michal did not keep her hands off of it. She was bitter. She despised David. She probably despised her dad. She probably despised her husband because he wouldn't even fight for her. He abandoned her. But you know what? The Bible never mentions her saying a word. She was probably so beat down and numb that when her husband turned and abandoned her, it was probably like, well, that's par for the course. So let's look at her poison very quickly. And that's in chapter 6. And I'm past time here, so I went past time in Sunday school too. Sorry, I'm going to hurry here. The first thing, she despises his worship. She despises his worship. Look at verse 13. And he said, well, I will make, no, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong chapter. Chapter 6, sorry. 2 Samuel chapter 6. And it was so that when they that bear the ark of the Lord had gone 6 paces, he sacrificed oxen and fatlings. And David danced before the Lord with all his might. And David was girded with a linen ephod. So David and all the house of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouting with the sound of trumpet. And the ark of the Lord came to the city of David. And as the ark of the Lord came into the city of David, Michal, Saul's daughter, looked through a window and saw the king leaping and dancing before the Lord. And she despised him in her heart. So she despises his worship. He's caused me pain. How dare he do that? She despises worship. Then secondly, in verse 20, she despises his wisdom. In verse 20, she says, how glorious was the king of Israel today, who uncovered himself today in the eyes of the handmaids of his servants. That word uncovered himself is one word that it means to denude. In other words, go naked. Now, it doesn't say that he was naked. It says he had a linen ephod. But she was so bitter. She despised his worship. She despised his wisdom. How glorious was the king. Oh man, can you just sense the sarcasm that was dripping from her voices in that being said? And then the third thing, she despises his worth. She despises his worth. Not just his worship, not just his wisdom, but his worth. She said, the quote in verse 20 says, as one of the vain fellows shamelessly uncovereth himself. The word, we have it in English, two words, vain fellows. The Hebrew word means empty, worthless. She tells David, you uncovered, you made yourself naked in front of the handmaids of Israel like a worthless deadbeat. She just despises him. She despises even his worth. But you know what? She'd gone through so much pain. She probably felt worthless. And she lashed out at him. Why? Because she felt like she was one of the vain fellows. She was worthless. So there is no question that Michal, and that's why I spent quite a bit of time showing us the pain that she went through, that it was inflicted upon her, listen, by other people. These were not choices she made. These were pains that were put on her at the choice of other people. She had no say in the matter. She couldn't tell her dad, no, don't do that. She couldn't tell David, no, don't do that. She couldn't tell, over and over and over again, these painful things happened that she had no control over. And I know there are people that have that. But because of how she dealt with that pain that she had no control over, she became a bitter, nasty person. This is not to diminish pain. But I ask you today, again, whether you're in this room, out through YouTube, out through the radio, the pain that has been inflicted upon you that you probably, now sometimes, we make dumb choices when, and we like, oh man, like that time we went up to Bilger's Rocks and I tried to jump that gap. And you guys, I tried to jump this gap and in cowboy boots and I landed and messed my leg up. When those guys were, oh, Logan's here. When those guys were carrying me out of the woods or the thing, I couldn't be going, man, I can't believe these guys did this to my leg. You guys caused pain for, no, it was me. It was my stupidity. So sometimes we can make decisions that we bring pain upon ourselves, but I'm talking about pain that was someone else's choice. You had no control. Here's the thing. How will you deal with that pain? Will you let it make you bitter? Or will you let God make you better through it? That is your choice. How you deal with it, whether you reject God because of it or whether you run to God because of it, that's in your control. But because Michal, she did not handle it well, the last thing that is said in the Bible about her is that she, quote, had no child unto the day of her death. I guess I shouldn't say the last thing is said about her, because she endured more pain when boys she raised, we talked about with Rizpah, boys that they weren't her offspring, but boys that she raised for somebody else were taken from her. But she had no child unto the day of her death. How will you handle the pain? Will you become bitter or will you become better? Father, I thank you for your word. And Lord, I thank you that you point out things like this to us. People that started off great, but became bitter. And Lord,